Hey, I'm Mike, and welcome to Retro Boost. We dive once again into the world of controllers today. Controllers, just like consoles, have gone through all kinds of evolutions over the years. Looking at modern controllers for the current generation consoles, as of making this video at least, we see a very similar design between PlayStation 5, the current Xbox, and the Nintendo Switch, with the Pro Controller specifically. Very similarly modern designed, only difference usually being the placement of the analog sticks and some other small differences, but largely they're looking real similar these days, which is not at all how it used to be in the past. The further back you go, the more dramatically different the controllers become. This led to me finding some really cool stuff in the form of modern ergonomically designed controllers, but they're compatible with retro game consoles. It was really cool to experience something like just straight up using an Xbox controller or the Retro Fighters controllers on a console like the N64, the original N64 controller being one that I really don't care for personally. So there's all kinds of options out there offered by companies like RetroBit and Retro Fighters. This led to an interesting problem though. I found myself drowning in controllers compatible for a variety of retro gaming consoles. Though not quite all of them, some of my consoles these controllers haven't had models offered for, namely the Dreamcast, at least the controllers themselves. There are receivers, which is what today's topic is. I had to ask myself the question, well, okay, so I can buy tons of these controllers that are compatible with different retro consoles here and there. Some are one-to-one, some are multi-compatible, like the Defender by Retro Fighters being compatible for PS1, PS2, and PS3. There aren't a lot of controllers like that, though, that are like a multi-console compatible. So I have this gigantic collection of controllers now. I had to ask myself the question, could someone achieve the opposite? Is there a way to use a modern controller, whether it be Xbox, PS5, Nintendo Switch Pro, or other, but just that one controller, and it works for all your stuff? Or at the very least, most of your stuff? Sorry, Philips CDI. And the answer is yeah, pretty much. So, over the past, almost year, I've been amassing 8Bitdo's retro receivers and RetroTINK's blue retro receivers and Brook Gaming's receivers, and I've done it. I have a variety of these receivers, and I can use one controller for all of them, which is today's topic. I'll be going over these different receivers, what consoles you can get them for, kind of how they work, what they pair with, and also 8Bitdo's Pro 2 controller and their Ultimate Bluetooth controller, both of which are options that I have been using that are compatible with all these things. It's gonna be fun. So first, let's talk about what's going on with these receivers. Let's start with 8Bitdo. 8Bitdo's options were introduced to me through the Retro Boost Discord server, which was really cool because that's the Discord server really paying off and being the exchange of knowledge I hoped it would one day be. It's also a place for, memes and joking and tomfoolery as well. Very fun. I had been aware of 8Bitdo's controllers, but didn't give them much thought because whenever I'd read their descriptions, I would see that it says, it's PC, mobile, Switch. Okay, I'm not really interested in that. I want them for retro consoles. Then I finally became aware of their retro receivers, and this is where the dots began to connect. So, 8Bitdo makes a variety of different retro receivers. They work for the NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis, PS1, and PS2. I believe that's all of them. There's probably one or two more. There are some digital ones as well. There's a USB one for the Switch and PC, and there's also a NES Classic one. Those are Bluetooth receivers, and their controllers that support Bluetooth can pair to them. And that was the magic moment where I was like, oh, there it is. The missing piece that I was always looking for. That created the possibility for my vision to come true. One controller, all the consoles. So, the way that 8Bitdo stuff works, They will have their like Bluetooth compatible controllers. Those can pair to these retro receivers, but so can other controllers too. PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch Pro, plus Xbox controllers predating the year 2021 because they switched Bluetooth technologies, plus more can pair to these things. When you pair them up, it's very simple. You're just kind of good to go from there. 8Bitdo's controllers, though, a lot of them support what's called the 8Bitdo Ultimate software. It's a button mapping and customization software. It's pretty damn cool. So I've got two of their controllers. The Pro 2, which I've always been looking at but never bought until I connected the dots with the retro receivers, and then the Ultimate Bluetooth controller, which has become my main use one. Both of these are compatible with the Ultimate software. It lets you not just map the buttons, but make further customizations if you wanted to mess with the dead zone for the sticks, customize the pressure sensitivity for the triggers. It's really cool, like how in-depth it can be. Plus, both of these controllers support 3 distinct profiles, so if you want to craft the perfect profile for a particular game or game console, you can have up to 3 of them, which is really awesome, switching them by pressing just one button. But I think the coolest thing is that you can do that, like map buttons, customize profiles, while still paired to the game console. During the live stream I did with Super Metroid using the Pro 2 controller, I would hop in and out of using the Ultimate software like real time to make changes and optimizations with the button mapping as I kind of played around with it. It's really cool that you don't have to have like the console just idling or like you can't pair it at the same time. Like you can do both. That's really cool. So really neat stuff. I like their controllers. They're definitely like Xbox design heavy. The Pro 2 was like the only one I saw that was like not an Xbox controller in terms of the stuff that's more sophisticated. They have like more retro inspired controllers as well, but as far as like the ones that are designed to be like modern ergonomic, it seems like they're all invocative of like Xbox / Nintendo Switch Pro design. If you're like a real hardcore PlayStation feel fanatic, they don't really have one for you at this time. But no worries, because you can just pair a DualSense to these receivers and bam, play these consoles with your PS5 controller. That's pretty killer. So that's 8Bitdo's stuff in a nutshell regarding the retro receivers. So going the 8Bitdo route, you could have one controller control for your NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis, PS1, and PS2. Granted, you do have to like pair it every time you turn on the console. That isn't a big deal though. You're talking 5 seconds waiting for it to pair. Just gotta do that process each time. It'll remember the last one it paired to, but it can't like fresh connect to different ones each time. Worth noting for going forward. I forgot to specify that. But overall, not a large chore. So now let's segue to the next chunk of consoles. Alright, so 8Bitdo gets us all set for a lot of consoles, but not all of them. So now what do we do? Well, the second wave of devices that I've been using, Blue Retro. So Blue Retro is really cool. It's an open source platform, much like, say, the GameCube video technology is open source. You see a lot of devices that use that for like GameCube HDMI adapters and so on. Blue Retro is an open source platform for controllers. You'll find a lot of different Blue Retro devices if you search around on the internet. The Blue Retro cores, you can find compatibility for tons of different game consoles. The ones that I have enjoyed using the most are the RetroTINK adapters, which get me going for the N64, GameCube / Wii, and most recently, the Dreamcast. Hopefully they'll keep making more. I think if RetroTINK kind of continues this, they could eventually like take the market share for receivers here and have one for everything. It would be really cool. So those are the 3 / 4 that I use now. I've talked about the N64 one in the past, did a whole video on it. Blue Retro, much like the 8Bitdo stuff, let you pair a variety of controllers to their receivers. They have their own internal button mapping and more abilities, which is pretty sweet. So whereas 8Bitdo lets you map buttons using their software, Blue Retro, that functionality is built into the receivers, and you do that via a web portal. You just got to connect your computer or phone to the receiver when it's on, and then you can access the website portal, blueretro.io, on a browser. I've had the most success using Edge as the browser, as disappointing as that sentence is. A reason to keep around Edge, oh no. But using the web interface, you can do things like firmware updates, which are important because that adds support for more and more controllers. When I was first talking about the RetroTINK N64 controller, that most recent firmware allowed for the Google Stadia controllers to pair up, which is cool because those would essentially be bricks because of Stadia, you know, crashing and burning, so people can put those controllers to use. So always important to keep the firmware up to date. Then you can also map the buttons. Mapping there is pretty straightforward. You just have like the source and the output, and you can tell it what flavor controller you're trying to use, and then map the buttons accordingly. When I talked about it, I used an Xbox One controller, PlayStation 4, and Switch Pro controller to demonstrate. As far as 8Bitdo, using the 8Bitdo Ultimate Bluetooth controller or their Pro 2, I don't use Blue Retro's internal button mapping. I just use the Ultimate software. It's the same result. Either way, I get what I want. I get to map the buttons. But if you were using something like an Xbox controller, again, it has to be like that pre-2021, because like they get a little tricky when they, after a certain firmware standpoint, their Bluetooth changed, compatibility isn't guaranteed. So if you're using like an Xbox One or those earlier era Xbox Series X controllers, or PS4, PS5, etc., you can map the buttons and so on using Blue Retro's web interface. And specifically, again, I have these for the N64, the GameCube, the Wii. On the Wii, it'd be for playing GameCube games on, so I have 2 of their adapters for the GameCube. And then the Dreamcast is the newest one to get released. That was released like not even 2 weeks ago from me doing this video right now, like last Saturday. So they just released the Dreamcast one, which is awesome because that was the last console in my collection that didn't have something to connect wireless to, but they released it, so now bam. So that takes care of everything except for PS3 and my Xbox. So how are we gonna get those talking? Enter Brook Gaming. Never heard of these before being informed of them through a very helpful comment on a previous video. Again, thank you to everyone who does that, who shares like, hey, I tried this, you were saying you needed something like this, here you go, look at this up. Everyone that does that, thank you so much. That's the whole point of me doing these videos. I learn something new every time, and this was a big one. So, no idea these existed. Brook Gaming, the Wingman adapters. They are USB-based Bluetooth-like receivers. These are designed more for like the modern side of things. What makes them kind of unique compared to everything else talked about is that they support like wired pass-through. So they have like a female USB on one side and then male on the other, and you can connect like a wired controller to them, which is really interesting. But they support wireless as well, and after you get their firmware updated, the 8Bitdo stuff can connect to them, which served my purposes. So another win for my 8Bitdo journey. I have 2 of them, the PS3 one and the original Xbox one. The Xbox One requires getting a female USB to Xbox controller like adapter cable, since it doesn't have USB ports on board like the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 do, as far as getting them for those consoles. But yeah, so really cool. They are the priciest of everything that I've talked about so far. 8Bitdo's stuff is pretty cheap, their receivers at least. The Blue Retro stuff, similarly so. The Brook Gaming ones are a little expensive, so I had to kind of wait on buying those. But they do what they needed to do for me. The firmware update process for them was a little bit clunky because I had to like do every kind of troubleshooting step. But once I ran it as an administrator without the VPN connected, it finally worked. No malware or viruses that I know of on my machine. So it was really fickle in how it updated. But once I got it updated, I was able to pair my 8Bitdo controllers to it, no problem. And they work great. And that was the last part. As of that moment, I now got something for everything. So between 8Bitdo, RetroTINK's Blue Retro options, and the Brook Wingman adapters, I can now use any modern wireless controller, but specifically my desire was the 8Bitdo Ultimate Bluetooth. I can now use that on any of my consoles and pair them up. And it works pretty great. I've had a couple of instances where the controller just kind of struggles to pair. It's very rare though, out of the countless times I've turned on a console and gone to pair the controller. It's worked. A couple times it hasn't. Little mistakes here and there. It's to be expected, really. But fully compatible otherwise. It's really awesome to have everything ready to go wireless, have one controller to just keep charged and ready, not have to worry about digging in the bin or keeping a dozen controllers like charged and at the ready. It's really awesome. I finally did it. The great unifier. And again, doesn't have to be 8Bitdo. You can find Blue Retro offerings, or I'm sure there's other companies out there I don't even know about yet, where you could achieve something very similar and just use like a PS4 or PS5 controller for all your stuff. For me, I wanted to use these particular 8Bitdo controllers. I think what I like is I like using the Pro 2 for like Super Nintendo kind of specifically, maybe PS1 as well, and then the Ultimate Bluetooth for all the other ones. But I've really been enjoying it. I've done a lot of live streams with them, encountering like little issues to work around here and there, and then doing their the ultimate software, being able to button map that like in real time is really cool. Overall, I've been really happy with them. The little things that have come up problem-wise are the kind of things you'd expect to come across eventually. But again, it's probably failed to pair to a console once or twice out of the probably 200 times I've had to swap between everything. So it's not a problem for me, and it hasn't repeated since. So probably a one-off thing. Well, fingers crossed. If that were to change, if the Ultimate Bluetooth controller falls apart in my hands, I will update the description like I have for other controller videos where things have happened down the road. And just for trivia's sake, for any tech enthusiasts of controllers out there, the Ultimate Bluetooth controller uses the newer Hall effect style versus the standard analog stick control method. So theoretically, drift shouldn't be an issue, but once again, I'll keep the description updated if that ever occurs to me. I've had the Ultimate Bluetooth controller for probably about 8 months now. It's been a while, and I've only ever had it fail to pair like that. Those once or two times it happened in the most recent live stream, and I've had it for 8 months, so it's been very reliable, all things considered. I've had a lot of other controllers fail far more frequently or break down in a similar timeline. So overall, been happy. So those are all the receivers I am now putting to use for my game console collection. Hope that you maybe have learned something new or didn't know that this was an option. Find it helpful, find it interesting. Let me know what you're using for all your console stuff too. I'd be curious to know if you're putting to use any of this stuff or something different. Or if you're, like I used to do, are you like running extension cords and using the OG controllers for all your consoles? Let me know. I'm curious. Thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you on the next one.